The Norco Sight is the hottest all-mountain bike on the market today. Alright, I've got nothing to back that up with, but it is an interesting bike, and today I'm going to share my thoughts on it after owning it for a year. I'm going to talk about the bike, about how it rides, and I'll compare it to the Norco Optic, which I also own. And for full disclosure, I did get this bike at a bit of a discount. The Sight is Norco's all-mountain offering, and with a 160mm fork and 150mm of travel out the back, it sits between the Optic trail bike and the new range enduro bike in Norco's lineup. An all-mountain bike tries to do everything well, but Norco's given the Sight aggressive geometry with a 64-degree head angle and 485mm of reach in the side blade. It's designed with Norco's ride-align system, which tries to give the same feel to each size of bike. They do this by changing the seat angle and the chainstay length with each size. That means my large has a 77-degree seat tube angle and long-ish 440mm chainstays, which help contribute to a lengthy wheelbase. Norco's not the only company that does this, but as a taller rider, I really like the trend because it puts me in a more centered position on the bike, both climbing and descending compared to other bikes I've owned in the past. Ride-Align also has a neat setup app which can help get your settings in the ballpark before you hit the trails. My bike's the C2 Shimano build, which has a carbon front triangle, carbon seat stays, and alloy chain stays. It comes with Fox Performance Elite suspension and a mix of Shimano XT and SLX drivetrain and brakes. This model retails for 8K, but you can get an alloy sight model starting from around 4K. So how does it ride? As you probably guessed from the geometry, the Sight likes to go down fast.
Oh, that hurts.
While it's not an overly playful bike, when speeds increase, the long wheelbase gives a ton of stability, which just says, stay off the brakes!
Oh.
It's also got a ton of grip, maybe more than any bike I've owned before. And that grip, along with the geometry, makes riding steep trails a cinch compared to shorter bikes.
Oh, main rut with confidence.
As a rider, that means you can stay centered on the bike without risking going over the bars. And that means you can ride features naturally, even when the trails are steep and gnarly.
Oh, maybe not the line.
On the flip side, when you do want to move the bike around, it takes a bit more effort than a smaller bike.
Oh, they weren't kidding, it's steep.
The Sight's combination of an upright seat tube and decent anti-squat makes it an excellent bike for sitting and spinning up long via road climb. There is, however, no getting around that it's a big heavy bike, and that means that some days I legitimately don't feel like pedaling it and I just go out on the Optic instead. On the topic of pedaling, the Sight will get some bob if you're not spinning smooth circles, but the anti-squat does its job when you're pedaling up a tech climb or sprinting out of a corner, so I put it about middle of the pack when it comes to pedaling efficiency. The big caveat here is I've never run the bike with trail casing tyres. All my riding has been with double down or downhill casing, which are a lot heavier than the Exo Plus casings that the bike ships with. With that said, from my first ride on the bike, I knew that mellow trails were not as steep. Prior to owning the Sight, I had an Ibis Ripmo, which is also an all-mountain bike, and I sort of expected the Sight to ride something like it, but the Sight needs a bit more speed to really come alive. If you're familiar with the trails here in southern Sydney, I generally don't take this bike to Loftus or to Mill Creek. The Optic's more fun and less effort on those trails compared to the Sight. The Sight can get around those trails, but it's more suited to bigger terrain. I found the Sight pretty easy to set up with a fairly wide range for air and quicker settings. Before I got the bike, I watched some reviews and a few of them said that they were having issues with the bike bottoming out. With the X2 shock, I never really found that, and the bottom outs were not harsh at all. The Sight's plush off the top and it skips over the trail chatter nicely, and my friends often comment about how controlled my bike looks in rough terrain. It's only when there are multiple big hits in a row that it can display some harshness. If you've been following the channel, you know that I ride my bike with a coil nowadays. The Sight's probably a bit too linear than would be ideal for a coil, but the high leverage rate means you can run a pretty heavy spring and still have good small bump. The coil does bottom out more than the air, but I feel the benefits outweigh the downsides for a rider of my weight and for the trails that I'm riding.
Send it.
Before we go any further, if you've made it this far, I would love for you to give this video a thumbs up. That'll help it get to more people, and that will hopefully help them. We're all about helping here. When I did my Optic first ride video, I had no intention of buying the Sight, but I said that I thought the Sight would be a better choice as a one bike compared to the Optic.
If I was having one bike, I'd probably go for the Sight.
I still think that, but the difference between the bikes is bigger than I expected. The Sight is burlier and more capable, but that comes at the cost of versatility. If there really is such thing as an all-mountain category, then the Sight is more leaning towards the enduro end of that spectrum. If you're trying to decide between these two bikes, my advice is to decide on what you prioritize. If you want the most fun bike for the majority of riding, that's probably the Optic. If you want the bike that's going to have your back in the biggest terrain that you ride, and you don't mind hauling around more bike than you need at other times, then consider the Sight. I've been super happy with the Sight. I think it looks amazing, and I rarely have a ride on it that I don't enjoy. It's predictable, and that gives me great confidence when I'm riding, and I feel its setup window is wider than some other bikes that I've owned, but it's heavier and less efficient than some of the competition. While the Optic is the funnest bike I've ever owned, if I was buying a single bike from Norco's lineup, it would have to be the Sight. It's more capable than the Optic without being the single-minded speed machine that I imagine the new range is going to be. That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.